Hi, thanks for watching. Okay, now in this video, I'd like to talk about Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. Okay, I think this is a phenomenal case where a lot of issues come into play on kind of a cultural level, okay, and also on a legal level. And I do have some background, I have a background in law. And I think this is a classic case where we see the coming together of, I think, the problem of the expert witness in legal cases. Expert witnesses, I'm sorry, that is a big problem. I'm just going to say the problem of the expert witness. Okay, so we have these expert witnesses coming in, and what I see is a tendency to overdiagnose and to diagnose depending on what the attorneys want. Okay, so I think if, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be criticizing psychology so much, but psychologists, they'll get up there as expert witness, and you'll see any diagnosis depending on what the attorneys are looking for. So it's just every time and again, psychologists show their backbone, which is apparently not very much. And or at least in the case of legal, forensic evaluations. It's just this is something that I see because I work in litigation. So I mean, you can basically get any diagnosis, almost any diagnosis you want. Um, so you have this legal issue, with the overdiagnosing, or just diagnosing depending on the interest of a party, and then you see also just the public interest and a lot of the public. I don't know how you say it, like the public. It's almost the public almost gets into like a frenzy over these things. It's sort of hysteria. I'm sorry. It's like it gets to a hysterical level. So not to say. I mean, obviously, these two people. You talk about cluster B. These people are cluster B all over the place. But I'm going to start right off before I even get into this video. I don't see any mental illness between Johnny Depp or Amber Heard. I don't think mental illness is the way to look at these people. Okay. Now, you probably all are wondering, like, how could I say that? Like, yeah, you see the behavior. I mean, the behavior is definitely cluster B behavior. I mean, it is in that area. So, we'll call that spectrum behavior. We'll call that subclinical. Well, I don't know. It's actually clinical. I mean, because they get to the point of being violent. But I think in terms of whether they're mentally ill, I want to say that it's just spectrum behavior. Okay, this is just people who are not mentally ill, but they've got tons of problems. Okay, problems. Okay, and the first of which, I mean, we don't even have to start the video to say that Johnny Depp's got a major substance abuse problem, and he's got the child star syndrome, like super immature. Okay, so basically we're dealing with basically I think on both sides what we're seeing with is just drastic severe immaturity issues, just major immaturity issues, um, and in some cases substance issues, okay, and just lifestyle issues. Just their whole lifestyle is so addictive and so unhealthy, so toxic. But this is lifestyle stuff. This is about just bad patterns, just being spoiled as hell, you know, and just being immature. So this is, I don't put any of this in the realm of mental illness. And anytime that Johnny Depp is acting like he's, mentally ill, it's because he uses, or he has, at least at times, he's used so many drugs and he's so spoiled by the people who work for him, and he just doesn't live in a world where there's any consequences. So he doesn't live in the real world, or at least at the time, the relevant facts. You know, we're not talking about a person who had any basic structure to have a mature adult life with real accountability and real normal structure. So these are people that don't even live in the real world, really. And so I don't see the mental illness. I see a guy who had a major drug problem and just tremendous immaturity and kind of like spoiledness, and both of them. But anyway, let's actually start the video. I mean, I'm just saying right off the bat, if you're looking for me to diagnose them with a mental illness, I don't see any mental illness. Okay, not even a little bit. Um, but I see major lifestyle issues, and they do occur on the cluster B spectrum. Okay, so definitely, it deserves attention from a cluster B point of view, but we also need to be careful, to notice when something is mental illness and when something is more lifestyle and maturity. So that's my like my introduction. So as far as like what actually happened, Okay, basically, this is not going to be so much clinical. This is more looking at, did the lawsuit in Virginia, did that actually cash out in what I think is a fair outcome? Okay, and also like, is Amber Heard so bad, or is Johnny so good, or whatever? I mean, I don't even know how to even address that. I mean, because I think, again, clearly we're dealing with two extremely immature people who are probably almost impossible to live with. Okay. And I think, Johnny may not have had a habit of being violent with his ex-girlfriends, but, just a string of relationships that didn't work out. And I don't know. I'm just going to say that at least at the time when Johnny was with Amber Heard, what I could see was just basically a meltdown, just an unmanageable situation that probably nobody should be expected to be able to sustain that kind of relationship. So anyway, but as far as like what built up to the case, the defamation case, okay. I'll start off by saying that I don't see Amber Heard as innocent at all. Okay. However, I also don't see her as terrible person. Okay. It's not like I see her as a bad person or anything like that. I just don't see her as innocent. Just like I don't see Johnny Depp as innocent. I basically see both of them just in a relationship that neither one really was ready to participate in that relationship as a responsible adult. Okay, so it's basically two adults that didn't have the qualifications for that kind of level of a relationship, and the result was predictable. But as far as actually what led to the merits of this defamation case, um, basically, my basic analysis, I'm going to be looking not so much at the legal part of it, because I think, whatever the law says, I'm sorry, Johnny Depp had better lawyers. So it wasn't like it was an equal, didn't have equal lawyer power on both sides. So, like, let's say if Amber Heard had better lawyers, let's say they may have been able to force Johnny Depp to get a psych evaluation. Okay. Now that didn't happen because he had better lawyers. So you see how a lot of times what's presented in a trial is really the result of who prepared the trial or the pretrial practice. Okay. And so, like, if you have better lawyers in advance of the trial, what ends up in trial is going to be better because your pretrial practice kind of set up a more an advantage. So Johnny Depp basically had a tremendous advantage before it even got to trial. So what we saw at trial was really already the result of his lawyer advantage. So so I'm not going to look so much at whether I think the lawsuit was exactly fair. I'm also going to look morally, was the outcome fair? Okay, and so that's what I'm going to focus on here. So so basically, as I could see the evidence, and again, let's be sure, Johnny Depp's lawyers probably got a lot of evidence out that probably should have been in. Okay, and Amber Heard just didn't have as good lawyers on her side. So what we saw in the trial is probably not the full picture. And even if Amber could get all her evidence in, there's probably a lot of actual facts of the case that we'll never see evidence of. Things that happen that we'll never have real evidence of. But my impression of this relationship was, first of all, okay, balance of power. Okay, Amber Heard is decades younger than Johnny. I mean, she's so much younger than him. Okay, so that already is kind of a major imbalance. And Johnny is way more popular, way more successful, and just a more powerful celebrity. Just way more powerful than Amber Heard. Okay, so right there, you can't look at this without looking at the dynamics of power. So basically, I'm going to look at Amber Heard as really being at the disadvantage right from the start in terms of power. Now, she may be more of a firecracker. She may have more of a temper. She may be more, in the end, more violent. Okay, in some ways. Okay, but I think really at all times, I think Johnny had more power. Okay, so that's kind of the beginning of it. Secondly, where did Amber have like some advantages? Well, I think as Johnny's getting older, even though he has all the economic power and the celebrity power, I think he could sense that he's getting older. Okay, and Amber was very young and fresh and very good looking, when they were getting started, and I think that triggered a lot of Johnny's insecurities, at least in the beginning. Okay, so Amber had some little advantages, so she wasn't without some advantages. And she had some advantages that could provoke Johnny's jealousy and insecurity, especially if she would maybe be in a movie, maybe trying to do a nude scene or something. It's clear that Johnny didn't like that. Okay, so there's a lot of toxicity right from the beginning. Where on the one hand, Johnny has way more power over this person, and then in some little ways, she has a little power enough to trigger his, let's say, his narcissistic issues, his insecurities. And I'm just labeling all this as subclinical because I think Johnny is not a mentally ill person. I think if there's any sickness that he has, it's just the substance abuse and just that terribly spoiling lifestyle of being way too rich and way too coddled. He's a person that just will never see any aspect of real life. Okay, so that's really more of a lifestyle issue with him, but it does result in very toxic, toxic environment and a toxic life for him. I mean, in the end, it's a tragedy for Johnny. He's kind of like Michael Jackson. He's just going to be smoking cigarettes and doing drugs, probably until he just gets sick, and he probably won't live a very long life, you know. But in any case, in the beginning of that relationship, you have that dynamic of, despite having more power, Amber had enough little, qualities like her own powers that were enough to threaten Johnny and to create, I think, in the beginning of the relationship, I think some incidents where Johnny probably was abusive. Okay. I think he probably did kick her on the airplane when he was drunk coming back from Boston or whatever. And I think he probably did, probably that story about where he, like reached into her pants to try, where she was like, he thought she was hiding drugs in her vagina or something. I mean, I'm going to go ahead and assume that happened. I don't know for absolute fact that happened, but let's just say a couple of things probably happened where she probably could say without lying that there was some abuse. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and accept that. But what I think made the case interesting is I think those abusive situations happen sort of more in the beginning of the relationship. Okay. And I think towards the end of the relationship, I think Johnny got over a little bit the insecure issues. And I think he kind of got over the threat that Amber had in being maybe a little younger, more attractive. I think he kind of got over that a little bit. And so I think he kind of adapted to the relationship towards the end, and I think he started becoming a little less toxic towards the end. Okay, now still toxic, but more psychological, less physical. And I think Amber started getting more physical towards the end. Okay, I think Amber started kind of feeling more secure to be a little more aggressive and not be so restrained. And so I think towards the end, I think it is fair to say that she was probably, relatively speaking, more, let's say more abusive towards the end. I mean, relatively speaking, I think that they were both toxic as hell, but I think if you're just kind of like comparing them, I think they sort of switch places. And I think towards the end, I think she became just a little more aggressive and a little more, let's say, a little more the bully in the relationship. And she did find liberties to really treat Johnny badly. Okay, so you can't discount that. So right there, you're faced with the hypocrisy. Okay, yes, she can say she's had a few moments where Johnny maybe has been, let's say, way out of line, and so she can technically claim that, she's been, let's say, the victim of abuse or been in an abusive relationship, but there is kind of a hypocrisy to it because she also has been, pretty rough with him, and really pretty bullyish, with him. So it's kind of like, I don't think it's so much a question technically in the truth. I don't think it's so much whether she lied in the Washington Post article. I really actually think technically she probably wasn't really lying in a sense. Okay. But I think it's just the hypocrisy of being a person who has also been abusive. Okay. Who's equally participated in an abusive relationship that is just not very, it's just very uncool. And it's really kind of a low blow to sort of point yourself as, like, say, portray yourself as a victim of abuse when you're just holding on to the technicality of the truth, when in reality, you've also participated. So I can understand both sides. I can understand how Johnny, right after giving her a massive divorce settlement, okay, was just slapped in the face by, what the hell is she? She's publishing this thing, making it look like I'm a wife beater. It didn't say he was a wife beater, but that essentially was the idea, was that he was this abusive guy. It was just kind of like just a low, unnecessary blow after she already received a pretty good divorce settlement. So that I can understand. Okay, I can understand Johnny being really mad, but to believe in the actual technicality of the legal outcome of the defamation, that she actually technically defamed him, I think actually it probably wasn't technical defamation. So I think that is, again, a case where the lawyers just out lawyered Amber's side. and they basically pulled the rabbit out of the hat and won a defamation case. But I think in reality, technically, I think she wasn't really lying. It's just that we all agree morally that it was very uncool for her to do that because she was being kind of a hypocrite. You see, so you can technically tell the truth and still be a hypocrite because she's not telling the whole truth. If she had told the whole truth, she would have put in the article, and I have also been abusive, and I have an anger management problem, and I beat up my ex-girlfriend because she beat up her ex-girlfriend, and she beat up her sister. Okay, so it's like, the hypocrisy is the problem, not the technical truth. Okay, of saying that she's been in an abusive situation. So I understand all that. Okay, so technically, I don't think it's defamation, but with good lawyers, you can do the magic and whatever. And she kind of, you could say she kind of deserves it because she's, even though it's not defamatory, it's hypocritical what she did because she's kind of like not telling the whole truth, and the half truth she's telling is unfair because she just received a large divorce settlement. So I can see all that. Okay, but then do I really think that it was the right thing to do to sue her? Do I think that's the right thing to do? Okay, now this is where I get into my feelings about this. Okay, I think Johnny Depp is an older person. He's much more powerful. Okay, she is weaker. Okay, she doesn't really have wealth. Okay, she may have had maybe $1 million here and there, but she is not wealthy. Okay, he is way more powerful than she is. Okay, um, technically, what she did was, I don't even think it was really, I don't think it was really defamation. But what I think he really decided to do is he was going to destroy her. Okay, so I think, to be quite honest, that's not to me the most classy way to behave. Okay. I think because he's more powerful, because he's older, because he's wiser, I think he probably could have just taken the hit. He probably even could have admitted in public, hey, I have issues. And maybe just gone through a slow rehabilitation, like a lot of people do. Mel Gibson, other people. Um, Take a look at Robert Downey Jr. Robert Downey Jr. for a while was really in bad shape, and he had a terrible reputation, but he just kind of, he took the hit, and over time he just kind of recovered his reputation. And I think Johnny Depp could have easily just been open and said, there's a lot of things I'm not proud of. I'm here to get better. I'm interested in improving my life. He didn't have to, and he would have spent a lot less money to do that. Okay, because in the end he lost money on the defamation lawsuit. Okay, and I think it was all about just destroying Amber. So nobody won from that. And Johnny Depp didn't win from the lawsuit, and all he did was really just destroy another person. Okay, and so Amber Heard, I mean, she'll still live. I mean, she's not going to be a poor person, but she basically lost any possibility of any the life she could have lived. Okay, and so in a sense, her career has been destroyed, or at least if she ever comes back, it's going to be after quite a while. So she's been really, really destroyed. So this is a situation where Johnny Depp relatively is a whale. I mean, he's a whale, and I think Amber Heard relatively is about the size of a big salmon. She's not really that big of a fish. Maybe at the most she's like a porpoise or a dolphin, but he is like a whale. Okay, and so I think in the end it's kind of like she just got clobbered by a much bigger person. And I personally, I'm not a big fan of seeing somebody who weighs 500 pounds beat the crap out of someone who weighs 120 pounds, even if the 125-pound person is, like, say, a bully and an asshole or whatever. I'm just not a big fan of seeing some mega huge oversized person just beat the crap out of somebody who's just much, much smaller. I think there's something kind of not very dignified about that. And also the fact that I'm sorry, she's a woman. And it's just kind of like, the whole thing is just, because everybody loves Johnny Depp. And yes, because she is rougher around the edges. She's not a sophisticated person, and she unfortunately has a terrible anger management problem, a very bad temper. She's kind of rude, and she has a lot of maturing to do. I think. I don't think she's mentally ill at all. I think she just never got a chance to mature because since she's very young, she kind of was a sort of like in the high school dropout mode, kind of playing the actor thing, just being an artist, and just not living in the normal pipeline that most people live in to be more mature. And so she just hasn't had a chance to be a mature person. And so what we're seeing from her is not mental illness, but I think it's just immaturity and just the intoxication and just the toxicity of what it means to be a young actor. Some people handle it better than others, but I think she shows a little more rough edges, and we just give her crap for that. And I don't think she's a terrible person. I just think she's a very rude person who could be a lot more mature, and hopefully she does become more mature, you know. But I don't believe that people like that should just be clobbered and put in a meat grinder. I mean, that's not fair, you know. I mean, we don't even do that to a lot of people who are murderers. You know, a lot of murderers just sit comfortably in prison. You know, it's like, but with Amber Heard, it was almost like we had to put her through a meat grinder and just watch her get clobbered. It just seemed to me kind of like the public was hungry for it, you know, somehow, you know, because we love Johnny Depp so much and because she did seem so unlikable that suddenly we all, as people, as a public, and a lot of people on YouTube, we felt like we had the license to put her through a meat grinder and just pulverize her. You know, knowing, I'm sorry, deep down inside, we know she's a weaker person. You know, so um, that's basically my analysis. I don't see any mental illness. I think Johnny Depp has major substance abuse issues. I think he has major substance abuse issues. I think Johnny Depp has major immaturity issues coming from the way he was brought up. You know, he wasn't brought up to be a mature person. And he maybe has some, you know, he's kind of messed up from some of the things he lived as a young person. I just don't see it, any of it rising to the level of mental illness. You know, I think Johnny Depp in another circumstance, you know, with a different kind of life, maybe he would have always been kind of immature because I think he has that streak. I think he has an immature streak, even if he lived, like, say, a blue collar life, you know. But I just think that I just don't see anything in him that to me has the kind of level of delusion or the level of almost kind of like, you know, insanity that I would see like someone who deserves a cluster B diagnosis. I mean, look at the combined, like say with Lori Vallow or let's say Jodi Arias. If you really see those people and if you actually know cluster B people in your real life, you know there's almost a level of delusion. Okay. And I don't see that. I think Johnny Depp is essentially sane, but I just think he's just done so many drugs and has such a an unhealthy lifestyle that I think his immaturity has just become massive, just massive immaturity. And unfortunately, you put him together with someone else who, this is a key difference. See, Amber Heard was terrible for him because in the past, Johnny Depp actually had pretty good girlfriends who were relatively sane, you know, relatively solid. Well, Amber Heard was even more immature than Johnny. So that was like a terrible combination. You know, couldn't possibly have worked out. So basically, to me, it's just a tragedy of two very immature people. But in the end, I'm sorry, but Johnny Depp showed in his immaturity that he's a bully. Okay. Yes, he had the right to maybe, you know, technically to try to do a lawsuit. You know, that's his prerogative. You know, she did do something very uncool by publishing the Washington Post article. That was uncool. That was totally uncool. It was uncalled for, and it was very disrespectful after getting her divorce settlement. Okay, what she did was just like punching below the belt. But I think Johnny could have been the bigger person. He didn't have to clobber her like that because he's a much bigger person. He's much stronger. And I think that I personally don't think that we should have a lot of respect for somebody who, being so much bigger, okay, actually takes advantage of that to just clobber somebody who is much smaller, okay. And let this be a lesson to all of us that, you know, Amber Heard, yeah, she's mean, yeah, she's rude, yeah, she's totally immature, she's crude, she's unlikable. But does that mean we have to put her in a meat grinder and just have her just obliterated by somebody who's much bigger? You know, I think that to me is I think that's a lesson for all of us. I think there's something very just not right about that, you know. And at the same time, we can accept her lack of innocence. We can accept how unlikable she is and how, you know, uncool she was. Really, just totally straight up hypocritical, you know. And you know, even though technically she told the truth in the Washington Post, I think we can all be very careful that that was essentially dishonest because it was not the whole truth. Okay, even if I think it didn't technically meet the standard for defamation, I think we just know in our hearts that it wasn't the whole truth and it was just an essentially dishonest, very uncool move. But unfortunately, you know, she is a porpoise or a like a dolphin, and Johnny Depp is like bigger than a killer whale, you know, and so he could have had more nobility and just been like, okay, you know, didn't have to do that, didn't have to unleash like that and destroy her. So in the end, you know, I'm going to go ahead and lean my scale not towards Amber Heard. I'm not in favor of her. She has to grow up, you know, and I hope she does grow up. You know, she should have the opportunity to grow up. So I'm not leaning in favor of her, but I am sort of looking at Johnny Depp as being essentially he was in the position to take the high road, and he's the bigger person. Okay, so the bigger person should have the expectation of behaving just a little more respectfully, and having a little more nobility. And I think he dropped the ball where he had the opportunity to come out, maybe taking the high road, you know. And so I think as a public, we did not do a favor to Johnny Depp to sort of like applaud his victory like that, because we're basically what we're doing is we're actually hurting him, because we're basically approving of him really abusing his power, and really doing that terrible thing of being the big person who beats up a small person. You see, even if he was provoked, it's just I don't think we're doing him a favor. And I think all the people that work for him and all the people that sort of like, bow down to him, I think we do him no favor, because he'll never have a point in his life where he feels even illuminated to try to grow up. And so if Johnny Depp dies at an early age, in a sense, we all participated in that. And so I don't know. That's just my analysis, but just to summarize, I don't see any mental illness. I see tremendous immaturity, and I think it's a lesson for all of us that immaturity can often show up in the cluster B spectrum. Yeah, spectrum. But mental illness, I'm not going to. I don't see it. If you guys see it, it'll be interesting. If you guys wanted to comment, or anybody wants to try to, put another point of view in the comments, whatever. I mean, I'm just saying what I see. But maximum just terrible lifestyle, terrible immaturity, and just a lot of drugs, and just very toxic living. And it should be a lesson to all of us. A lesson to all of us, and even those of us who are mentally ill. We ought to take the lesson. If we happen to be doing a lot of drugs or just living kind of toxic, at least if we could clean up the toxic part of our lives, anybody can get better. Even a person who is mentally ill. But in this case, these people, if they could live a cleaner life, they would be much healthier, I think. But unfortunately, with Johnny, he's getting so old. I don't know what his chances are of really changing. At least with Amber being so young, hopefully, she has a chance to maybe at some point, kind of turn her life around. And I would hope for that. So, I'm not favoring anybody. I'm just, why not wish something good for people? So I'll end this by saying I just wish Amber Heard the best, and I hope she slowly takes the road of, hopefully becoming a more mature person. And it's not a terrible crime to have a bad temper, but I also have a bad temper, but we have to learn to live with it. And so, I hope she takes the road of becoming a more mature person. So that's basically my summary of this Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. Thanks for watching.